Hey folks, thanks for coming over to Capitalism for Good. This is a part of a larger project where I am on a mission to interview 100 business leaders about the positive impact that they have on their internal and external communities. It is through these interviews that we will dig into how we can use the ways in which we make and spend our dollars in order to benefit the greater good. Folks, today we have Peter Krull. He is partner and the director of sustainable investing at Earth Equity Advisors. And also, I will say, book recommender extraordinaire, fellow podcaster. What did I call him? The generational philosopher of sorts. He indulges me in kind of a deep dive into the way each generation has pushed forward the envelope in what he calls this like non-linear life, which is really cool. We talk about the importance of getting out and experiencing the world and experiencing your life, which all kind of ties back to being intentional about the way in which we move throughout the world, including the ways in which we make and spend our money, which again, kind of tying back to what he does at Earth Equity Advisors in really making sure that the investments are focused and directed toward companies that are providing solutions to some of the largest kind of crises of our time and of our planet. And so he does do some kind of overarching some high level education pieces about socially responsible investing that has now evolved into sustainable, resilient, and innovative investing, the importance of it, how he got there, some advice that he has for people who might be either dipping their toe in or jumping in fully all the way. We have Ted Lasso quotes here. It is all of the things, and I really enjoyed talking to him. He is a very insightful person, and once again, one of these folks that brings up a sense of like calm and reassurance that the world can be topsy-turvy and there can be all of these different things going on that might be a little bit disconcerting, frustrating, alarming, scary, all of those kinds of things. But I'm going to go back to something that continued to come up while I was talking to him, which was focusing on solutions and that leading to fulfillment and satisfaction, and also as kind of a driver to continue to push the envelope in a good and positive way. He also kind of talks about some of these pitfalls to kind of watch out for as we're along the way and moving throughout the world. So anyway, I will just let him jump in and kind of take over so that you can listen to him kind of explain all of those things better than I can. But if you are interested in hearing more, understanding more about what he does at Earth Equity Advisors, or just interested in sustainable, socially responsible, innovative, resilient investing in general, I will put links to his book that is coming out. You can pre-order it, The Sustainable Investor, Earth Equity Advisors, the company earthequity.com. Also links to books, his podcast as well, Dollars and Change, Dollars ampersand change. He mentions two different episode. One is a two-part episode. The other is his premiere guest episode with Ed Bagley Jr. I will put links to all of those things, plus others that he kind of talked about and gave a shout out to while we were talking. So look for all of those things in show notes, in blog posts, on the Patreon, in the company mentions, all of those kinds of things. And with that all being said, we'll just let him kind of tell this story here. Enjoy. Jump on in with a little bit of your backstory
Yeah.
about kind of what career moves, what about you in your personal and career life led you to your current position here at Earth Equity Advisors?
That's a great question. So I have a degree in communication from Bethany College in West Virginia, a tiny, tiny little liberal arts school. And out of Bethany College, I took a job in TV news and worked in TV news in a couple different locations, one including Beckley, West Virginia, making something on the order of like $12,000 a year. And this would have been in like 1994. And so I recognized rather quickly that 12,000 a year was really not easy to live on and ended up moving back home to Buffalo, New York, which is where I grew up, and started working in consumer electronics. So it was a company sort of like a Best Buy that's around now, and worked my way up through the company from a salesperson on up to management. I was in for a while. I was in charge of training for the whole company, so I had like 3,000 people that I was working on training on sales and products and things like that. And there came a time when, I heard through the grapevine that the company wasn't doing so well, and so I started looking at other options. At that time, I was in just outside of Roanoke, Virginia. I was a store manager at that point, and was also a Merrill Lynch client. And so I reached out
Mm.
to my financial advisor back up in Buffalo with Merrill Lynch and said, "Can you get me an appointment or an interview?" And I went into Roanoke and did an interview, and before you know it, I was a working as a financial advisor. And I'd always had an interest in the markets and economics and things like that. Even though my degree was in communication, Bethany College had these really cool classes called J term or January term, where you could take a class on something that interested you, and stock market class, and was hooked back then. So I started with Merrill Lynch in '98, right at the end of '98. Um, Got licensed, went through that whole process, and worked with them for about 5, 6 years, and learned the game, if you will. And from there, realized that I didn't necessarily want to work for such a big organization. Did a
Mm.
really short stint at a bank. Realized that working in the bank was certainly not didn't work for me. And it was about that time that I also had met Melissa, my wife, who is much, much smarter than I am. She has PhDs in microbiology and molecular genetics. So she's a scientist and a writer and a trainer and does all kinds of cool stuff. And I also, at about that time, had a chance to meet a gentleman named Bill McDonough. And Bill was sort of considered one of the preeminent green architects of the time. And he had written a book called Cradle to Cradle, which was about circular economies, or the idea of eliminating waste in economies. And so spent an afternoon with him and sort of put conversations that Melissa and I were having together about the environment and sustainability and climate change, and that discussion with Bill about sustainability together, and said, I think I can do this. At the time, it was socially responsible investing, but it really was, focused on environment and society and things like that. And hung up my shingle, and that was in June of 2004. And
Okay.
so we just surpassed our 21st year in business. And that's my business story right there. Obviously, there's a little bit over the last 21 years that I left out, but that's how I got to this point.
That is such a good summary. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about Earth Equity Advisors and
Yeah.
like the things that you're focusing on and kind of dig into the meat of that before I kind of take you back to you and your personal life and your journey?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Earth Equity Advisors, we are a registered investment advisor. So we help individuals and institutions invest their money. But we do it a little bit different than you might find if you went to one of the big investment houses. We help people, like I like to say, align their investments with their values. And so instead of just investing in anything and everything, we help people invest in a way that uh, is focused on solutions to our greatest challenges. It might be, resource scarcity. It might be climate change. It might be equity. Just a number of different things that are meant to take us into what I call the next economy. It's really, it's where we're going. And there's a lot of, if you pay attention to the news, there's a lot of politicians who call what's called ESG investing, or environmental, social, and governance investing. They call it woke investing, and they're doing everything they can to um, impede a free market, um, which is ironic considering they all talk about free markets. But that's a completely different story. Um, anyway, we
Huh.
work with folks and do a financial plan with them. We will and then we help them invest their monies um, in like I said, in solutions. So instead of just trying to make what I call a less bad portfolio, we actually want to find what are the companies, what are the industries, what are the sectors that are actually leading us into that next economy. So I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and one of the things that I recognized when Hurricane Helene came through was that we weren't prepared for what happened. And we had a failure of our utility systems. We had a failure of our transportation systems, and we had a failure of our communication systems. Those are all infrastructure investments. And so, I had been thinking about this for quite a while, but one of the things that really came to mind was the word resilience and adaptation, and the two words, resilience and adaptation. And so we really started to integrate that into our investment process and into our investments, because we can't be building our infrastructure for the storm that hit yesterday. We need to be building our infrastructure for the more intense storm that's going to hit tomorrow. And that is a major, major investment that we're going to need. And so when I started in this business, SRI stood for socially responsible investing, like I mentioned earlier. Um, but SRI has evolved over that time. It's evolved into sustainable and responsible investing. And I came up with what I'm calling sort of a redefinition of SRI, in that it's sustainable, resilient, and innovation investing. And sustainable because we need to reduce our impact. That still is a really, really important aspect of climate and sustainability, et cetera. So we need to reduce our impact. But we also live in what I'm now calling a changed climate world. The reality is it's not climate change anymore. It's not something that's in the future. It's something that's literally happening now. And so we need to have more resilience and adaptation to these storms and to the droughts and to the fires and to all these things that are going to continue to increase in both quantity but also in intensity. If you can have a hurricane 500 miles inland, like we are in Asheville, then pretty much nowhere is off limits at this point. And then the I is for innovation. I mean, what defines our generation in many ways is innovation, and it's the thing that sort of brings the sustainability and the resilience aspect of it together. And so it's from my perspective, it's a really good story about what we do. We help people invest for what the reality is on the ground. When you're investing in an index, the S&P 500 or something like these, which a lot of the experts will say just own the whole market and invest that way. But a lot of what you're investing in is in the rearview mirror. It's the economy of yesterday. Our goal is we're trying to invest in where the economy is going. What's the economy of tomorrow? And it is a cleaner, more resource efficient, more resilient, and more equitable economy.
I love that so much. Can you talk a little bit about, or do you have examples of some of the types of companies or the types of things that you
Mhm.
are looking at or you're directing some of those investments into?
Yeah, of course. And some of them are going to be the easy ones, like
Yep.
solar or wind or EVs or things like that. And of course, we're obviously dealing with systematic or systemic changes and challenges to those right now. But the reality is that that train has already left the station. In 2024, 96% of all new electricity generation and systems were either solar, wind, or batteries. Only 4% were either nuclear or fossil fuels. And so that is a paradigm shift, and that is not going to change. Is it going to be slowed down? Probably a little bit, but the reality is that most people who invest sustainably understand that this is a paradigm shift, and paradigm shifts don't happen overnight. They happen over an extended period of time. Some other areas that we invest in: real estate. Real estate where you're reducing your impact. It might be LEED certified buildings. Um, a third of our emissions in general come from the built environment. So how do we reduce those emissions? How do we make buildings more efficient, both for energy and also for water? How do we make buildings more healthy for people to live in? And so that's an aspect of it. Um, I mentioned infrastructure. How do we create roads that are more resilient to the changes and to the storms and things, and even things like biotech. I'm a strong proponent of really high technology biotechnology, if you will, not big pharma, but the ones that are really using cutting edge techniques, using AI to help develop new drugs, using CRISPR, and gene editing technologies, things like that, to actually make us a healthier society, because a healthier society is by definition going to be a more sustainable one.
Yeah, that last piece really hit home to me when you're talking about like the biotech piece and using CRISPR and AI and those new innovative techniques. So before I launched this CFG project, my last role company role was I was working for a military medical research company, specifically looking at vaccine and therapeutic development for emerging infectious disease and
Hmm.
cancer research. And one of the things that it's been a huge headline over the past, 6, 8 months, has been the rollback of a lot of the government funding. And
Yeah.
from both those who are government military researchers and also that are benefiting from the funding of it, because obviously these things don't happen in a vacuum. Even those
Right.
military researchers are partnering with folks in biotech and pharma and universities and all over the place. And so it's really exciting and heartwarming for me to hear. And I wanted to kind of pause and emphasize that for anyone
Yeah.
who comes from that world with me, that there are really cool, innovative folks that are here to kind of back up some of those investments. And while there might be a shift in what the money and the funding might look like, it's it's not it's not all gone. It's not all going
Yeah.
away. We just have to kind of rethink the way things are looking, but there are cool things out there that'll keep pushing the envelope and that'll keep kind of rolling with
And when we
that.
think of real world effects of this, so we're dealing with heat. You and I were talking about the heat the last few
Yeah.
weeks here. It's August right now when we're chatting. But my wife and I were talking this morning, and again, she's a scientist, so she's reading news, and she's seeing that in China and in Brazil and a couple other areas, that there's a chikungunya outbreak happening. Now,
Mhm.
that's happening, of course, because with climate change, we're going to see more and more of these diseases being prevalent, and they're going to be moving from tropical areas to subtropical and then even into temperate areas. And so, if we're not investing in the biotechnology and the vaccines and in really understanding how these diseases work, um, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's scary to think of, really.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And the global collaboration of those things, I think, is also imperative
Oh,
because
yeah.
when you're talking about chickpea outbreaks in other parts of the world, we're so connected that that's here tomorrow. And also the benefit of where science and technology is going. That if we're looking at a vaccine or a therapeutic for chikungunya, that could be related to Ebola or Marburg
Yeah.
virus or Legionnaires or whatever. That also, we just saw in real world practice with COVID. And,
Yeah.
you can have your own opinions about how the rollout of that was, but it would have looked a lot different should we have not been able to
Right.
coordinate, however messy it might have been. But like, it could have
And
looked a lot
one of
different.
the companies we invest in is a company called Recursion Pharmaceutical, and they do AI drug discovery, and that's how they look at things: is how can we take the data that we've already got from a pre-existing treatment and in silico actually try it for other diseases, try it and see if it works, if it makes sense. Um, and amongst many other things that they do. But the idea that we can hand this off to the AI, and in many cases for new treatments, have the amount of time it takes to go through the process, and also have the amount of money it takes to get there, because it's $1 billion from start to finish to pretty much take any drug from inception to commercialization. If you can reduce that by half, that means that you can double the amount of research that you can do.
Yeah. I mean, it just in general, like sustainable investing in terms of thinking of it not as far as like environmental sustainability, but ROI to be able to like stretch your dollar further, I
Yeah.
think is a really important point there as well.
Well,
I could
and
really
the
take
way I
us down
look at it,
oh, keep going.
I'm sorry. So when I'm putting a portfolio together, traditionally we would buy large companies, mid-cap companies, small companies, international emerging markets, things like that. And that's still an important part. That's always what I would call the core of any portfolio that you put together. But there's this other concept of thematics that we've really started to sort of bolt on, if you will, to the core. And so anytime I put together one of our fund portfolios, we're always going to have that core, but we also as of right now at least, we have infrastructure, we have biotech, we have water, and we have the energy transition. Those are all thematics that complement that core of investments. And who knows, next year there might be another thematic that we add onto there, or we might drop one off. But the idea that, traditionally we just own those core is nice, but it also doesn't give you the opportunity to maybe invest in those opportunities in a very specific and a very focused way.
Ah, can you take us from there into the kind of looking at it from the company perspective that is receiving the investment? Like, can you talk a little bit about the impact and the benefit of investing in general from kind of a high level perspective,
Mhm.
from the company perspective? Like, why why should we be investing in companies to begin with?
So we only invest in companies that are publicly traded on the stock market, so New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, et cetera. And so, in theory, they're not necessarily seeing my dollar when I put it into them. This is not like private investing where that money is going very specifically to fund a particular project or fund expansion, et cetera. So the impact that I'm having on that company is in creating demand. So, stocks are basically traded based on supply and demand. If there's a if we see more demand, typically the price will go up. If there's less demand, typically the price will go down. Now, that demand is spawned by a number of different things. Obviously, how well the company is doing. What do their numbers look like? What are their products? Are they innovating? Those are the kinds of things that drive the stock price of a company. And so when we look at a company that, are you sustainable or are you not? Do you have a product that is related to sustainability? Are you trying to solve a problem that is ultimately going to take your market share from this amount to, a much larger amount? Then that's where the opportunity is. Again, ExxonMobil, for example, doesn't care that we don't invest in them because they are causing our existential crisis. But conversely, for solar, doesn't necessarily care either, other than we're creating demand for wanting to buy that stock.
Thank you. I really want to take it back to you as kind of a person and why, what were the types of things that drew you into this very particular and intentional way of utilizing money in investments?
So money is the way we invest, the way we spend our money, it's all an extension of us. Um, when you go to the store, do you buy the organic product or you buy the conventional product? When you buy a car, are you buying a fossil fuel powered vehicle or are you buying an EV? And there's an intentionality to that. And when I was looking at how I was doing business when I was with Merrill Lynch, And when I was having these conversations with Melissa, when I was having these conversations with Bill McDonough, it really all just sort of clicked that if you're going to do this, why not do it the right way? If you're going to do this, why not do it so that way you not only have an impact on somebody's bottom line, but you also have an impact on the world around them. And it felt like an opportunity. And of course, this was 21 years ago, so the big ones, the BlackRocks of the world, the Vanguards, the Fidelities, weren't even close to thinking about adding this to their investment mix. So this was before anybody was doing it. And Simon Sinek wrote, Start with Why. I don't know if you've read that book, but it certainly is it's worth a read because everybody when the way he looks at things is there's three questions. There's what you do, there's how you do it, and there's why you do it. So what I do is I do investments. That's pretty simple. How we do it is pretty typical relative to most investment managers, other than we add on that sustainable level of due diligence. But it's the why that ultimately matters. It's what helps you connect with other people. It's what helps us connect with clients. It's what helps us really make our impact. And so I grew up outdoors. I grew up right between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. We had a little piece of land that was in the woods that I spent my summers at. And so I've always had this connection to the outdoors. Right now, we're actually at our cabin, which is on a beautiful lake in far western North Carolina, and spending time here, spending time, during the summer, being able to hike around, being able to get out on the lake, really matters. And if you're not taking the time to experience why we're doing all this stuff, then you're really missing out. And for me, if I can take and merge all of those things together, which I think we've done a pretty decent job of, um, then I can look back, at whenever it is that I retire and say, okay, I've done something well.
Yeah. It it makes me think of recently I interviewed Kate Asseroff, who is the owner and founder of a sustainable shampoo, conditioner, kind of body care line called Dip. And I was asking her about what she saw in the future, like where she wanted to go next with the company or where she wanted to go with herself personally, kind of what she have her eye on. And it was so profound. She's not the first person that I've interviewed in this project to have a similar answer. But she was like, I have a boring answer because I'm really content. I'm not really trying to grow this company into this billions of dollars thing. I'm not trying to do all, trying to keep it manageable and do my piece and spend the time with my family. And she was so proud of the team that she had built internally that she was working with, and also the kind of balance between where she was with her family and her personal life and work life and all of these types of things. And I think in a world where sometimes there is so much value placed on success in this like a superficially achievable way or whatever that looks like, that this idea of being able to like experience why you're doing this thing and being a human and the connection to the outdoors and all of these kinds of things and being able to almost like merge and blend your values. I wonder if you have experienced that at all in your own life. I mean, while you've been in this position for 21 years, before then you tried on a bunch of different jobs and a bunch of different roles and different
Yeah.
types of things. Do you notice that sense of satisfaction, that change, that distinction between kind of where you were then and where you are now?
Well, I'm a very strong opponent of what I call the nonlinear life. Our parents and grandparents lived this very linear life. You go to school, you get married, you have kids, you get a job, you retire, you die. I mean, that sounds sort of depressing, but that's really what previous generations did. And starting with my generation, I'm Gen X, we started to break from that mold a little bit. Not completely. I still know a lot of people in my generation that followed the linear line. But I think really our generation is the one that has started to live this nonlinear life and have tried different things and done different things. Um, one of the things that has been really important to me is travel, is being able to go to different places, to experience the world, to experience different cultures. And I think in many ways that's what holds us back as a country, is that we don't have that curiosity to really understand why people do different things and what different cultures are all about. And I think if we had more curiosity, then the world would be a different place. One of my favorite lines from Ted Lasso, and if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, it's the best show ever. But it's be curious and not judgmental. And while I think we're all sort of there's a judgmental part in all of us. It's the idea that can we overcome that, and can our curiosity, um, maybe even on a limited basis, overwhelm that judgmental side of us, and be really curious about what other people do, why other people do what they do, and actually, instead of prejudging it, actually have that idea of curiosity.
I love that so much. I think that's such a beautiful way to look at life and to kind of intentionally move throughout the world. Do you do you have any advice or kind of words of wisdom for someone who might be in a position where they're feeling like they're a little stuck? Like, okay,
Mhm.
Peter, all of that sounds really great. You're talking about a fantasy land. Like that's not what the real world looks like. I don't know how to get there. I have all these other things going on. Like, do you have any advice for people to kind of move a little bit beyond those boundaries of kind of that linear life and just
Mhm.
start to push the envelope a little bit?
I'm going to recommend another book to maybe ease into this. It's called oh, I just had it up here. Um, it is called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It's from Rick Rubin, and Rick Rubin is considered one of the best music producers of this generation. And it's about easing yourself into creativity. And most people think, they look at what I do and they're like, well, you're not in a creative position. But the reality is everything we do is a creative position. And that's the angle that Rick comes at this from, is how can we start to look at the world in a different way? And so one of the things that always drives me a little crazy, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, is um, when you meet another professional, and like, how you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. That's just sort of a rote answer. Are you really busy, or are you actually, I don't know, even know what the word is. Is it just your answer because you feel busy, you feel overwhelmed, you feel like you have got so much on your plate? And the reality is sometimes we do have a lot on our plate. But I think that more often than not, we don't have as much as we think we do. We don't have the same kind of pressures that we think we do. And being able to take a step back, this is something actually that Melissa and I have worked on, is um, we think so much of the long term that we forget to celebrate our short-term victories. And in those short-term victories, they help create perspective. And when you create perspective on a regular basis, that idea of busyness can sort of fade away a little bit. You can say, oh, let's celebrate this because I hit this intermediate milestone. And it doesn't mean that you're getting participation trophies like like we might have gotten in Little League or whatever, but it means that we're able to recognize where we are. We're able to recognize the progress that we've made, and and again, I'm by no means a master at any of this. I find myself getting caught up in stuff just like any of us do, but um, if you can be a little bit more intentional about how you go about your day, if you can be a little bit more intentional about how you gauge your progress, and finally, if we can be kinder to ourselves, that's one of the things that we run into, I think, way too often, is that we put so much pressure on ourselves that we don't allow any of these other things to sort of come in, any of this relativity, any of the context to come in.
I I love what you were talking about being busy, whatever that word means. My good friend Melanie has always said for many years that busy is a mindset. And like if
Mhm.
someone complains about, oh, I'm just so busy or I'm too busy to do something, she'd be like, busy is mindset. You can do whatever you want. And
Yep.
I have always found that to be so cool and also like a good reminder of like you're right, you can be as busy as you are and you can still do more, you can still do less, you can still do whatever it is that fills your cup up every day.
Yeah, I like that phrase.
I also I I think that it's really cool when you were going back to talking about Gen Z, or sorry, Gen X being Gen Z is where I want to go with this. But Gen X starting to break from that mold of that linear life and starting to kind of push those kinds of boundaries. And it's something that I have been thinking a lot of recently in some of the conversations within my network about Gen Z in the workplace. And
Mhm.
that generation, again, sweeping generality here, but that generation has a different approach to work and a different approach to life than even I am 35, I'm a millennial. And so many of the people in kind of my age group are now managing and fostering those relationships for those people coming into the workplace from Gen X or from Gen Z. Gosh, now I'm getting all my letters confused. Um, but we're talking about a lot about how they look at life a little bit differently and they look at work a little bit differently and just I don't know whether one thing's good, bad, or the other. We all learn from each other. It's a part of being humans and getting older and
Yeah.
evolving and all of those kinds of things. But I wonder what your perspective is if we're on kind of where we're going as a society and as a people in the future, and kind of what are the things that maybe both give you pause a little bit of, hey, maybe we should kind of think about this and be a little aware, but also the things that are really exciting about like what that progress has meant in comparison to kind of your parents' generation and
Mhm.
the folks that came before them.
I'm gonna look at this a little bit from the pandemic perspective because the pandemic changed so much for us. The pandemic, especially for Gen Z, a lot of them went through like their last years of high school and some in college um, in quarantine, and that was a complete shift for them, and I think it probably has affected how they look at the world. I'm not probably, I'm sure it's affected how they looked at the world. One of the things that it changed for us as a firm is that we went from being a really close firm who was in the office every day and who really was very supportive from an in-person perspective to having to do it remotely. And it really changed, I think, how we worked as a team. And I think it enhanced it for a little while, but I think that that lack of physical engagement also started to degrade as well. And so we've really started to come back to being in the office a lot more over the last, I'm going to say 6 to 12 months. And you really feel the energy from from being together. I've got a thought. I'm going to go walk into Neil's office and throw an idea at him. That doesn't work so easily when you're remote. It unfortunately just doesn't. If I need something done quickly, I can go over to Rebecca's office and say, "Hey, I really need to get this done. Can you handle this?" And it's done immediately. But talking about the creative side, we were talking about Rick's book a second ago, this creative aspect of it, we have been able to be so much more creative because we can bounce ideas off of each other and we can be in real time, which I think we really lost during the pandemic. I'm not somebody who's going to be hard and fast about you must be in the office, but I just see this difference between being able to have, true in-person um, interactions with people versus the virtual kind. It's not as fulfilling, and I don't think it is as productive ultimately.
Here I go taking us down a rabbit hole that is, a little bit once again beyond the scope of sustainable and socially responsible and innovative investing, but really asking you to be a generational philosopher here. But I wonder if you, along with that kind of return to office shift, that focus on like interpersonal relationships and interaction in real world physical life, if also you're talking about the benefits of travel and experiencing life in a different
Yeah.
kind of way and being outside in nature and those kinds of things. And if we kind of as a society also get back into those kinds of things and go like if we'd been quarantined for so long, if we'd been kind of stuck mm, physically and also like mentally inside our houses for a while, if we're starting to spread open those horizons and go out into the world and
Yeah.
experience things in a different way, if that culture might also maybe change. And I don't know if you experienced any kind of like pushback or hesitation of the return to office movement, but I have noticed that in other kind of areas. And I wonder if just like generally as we go back to being a more physically interactive world, if that frustration might kind of ease a little bit. I don't know what your take is on that at all.
I would hope so. Yeah, I did have a lot of pushback on return to office, and but I think the more that we have been in the office, um, the more that we've been able to see, oh, this actually does work. We so after we got our vaccines in 2021, we started looking at places to go. And in, I think it was August, give or take, of 2021, we flew to Iceland and we had an Iceland trip. Um, and it was just so nice to be out of the house. It was so nice to be around other people. We took all the precautions and, did everything we were supposed to do, testing, etc. But we had an amazing time. And, you know, part of the amazingness was that there weren't many people traveling. So we had, we didn't have to fight for stuff. But just the idea that we were able to get out of the house, that we were able to be around a few other people, that we were able to experience Iceland. Iceland is, if it's not on your bucket list, it needs to be on your bucket list. It's just a magnificent place to be. Um, so, there's so many perspectives to look at this from, but I think ultimately we are a social species. I think that we need people to be around other people.
And if that doesn't take us back to socially responsible and investing and sustainable investing, I don't know what does. My next question that I had written down for you is for those that are wanting to just like dip their toes into
Mhm.
some kind of intentional investing like this, or maybe they want to jump in the deep end, but it'll be a shift, it'll be something new for them to think about it. What's your advice for the first steps or next moves there?
Mhm. So a lot of it, unfortunately in our business, the economics of it make a difference. And so, for us, we work with folks who've got greater than 250 or $500,000. And so it might not be the person sticking their toe in. But for that initial person sticking their toe in, there's lots of opportunities. You can pick a mutual fund. I can't give you specific ones for people to buy because those are really personal and individualized. But there's a lot of good companies out there. What I would say is that when you're trying to buy a fund, which is really how somebody should start out, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Number one is use a technique called dollar cost averaging, which means just you consistently put money in. So decide if you can afford $10 a month or $100 a month or whatever your number is. Just start a program where you are consistently putting money in. When you're picking a fund, we are very strong proponents that you should not own fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the cause of our existential crisis. And so, take a little bit longer to do a little bit more due diligence and look under the hood, as I like to say. Look to see what those funds own. And if they own Exxon or some other, companies that are, fossil fuel based or contributing to our crisis, try and find another one. Get help as soon as you can, with, from a professional. And, if you have saved up enough to work with us, obviously we certainly want to help you invest with your values. That's why we're here. Um, there's another idea. I have a book coming out in November called The Sustainable Investor, and the URL for that is sustainableinvestorbook.com, and you can pre-order the book there. But and it's mostly written for financial advisors, but it's also written for everyday people who are trying to invest sustainably as well. It gives you some guidelines. I talk a lot more in there about things like greenwashing, which is when greenwashing is when you've got a fund or some kind of investment that says, "Hey, we're green," or "We're sustainable," or whatever it is. But then when you actually lift up the hood and look at what their holdings are, it makes you scratch your head. There's one that I always pick on, and it's an example I give in the book, where it's the second largest exchange traded fund on the market, and it's from one of the big investment firms, BlackRock. But when you actually look at it, they have Exxon, they have McDonald's, they have the company that owns FanDuel Gambling, just a number of things that just you look at it and you're like, so what's responsible about this? I don't get it. So it's don't judge a book by the cover. So if it says it's sustainable, if it says it's green, if it says it's climate friendly, whatever the label is, you've got to look a little bit deeper, because most of them,
Yeah.
the vast majority of them, are just going to be less bad relative to what the index is. Trying to find the ones that are actually solutions providers, that's the hard part. And again, I talk about that a lot in the book. And anybody who reaches out to us, we can talk to them one-on-one and give them suggestions too.
Thank you for that. I so many things to think about. I am sure I'm gonna have a lot of questions after I kind of like comprehend all of your wisdom and everything. I it in thinking about, just trying to not continue to pepper you with questions and try to wrap things up. My last question that I have for everyone is, who is another business or leader that you see out there in
Mhm.
the world that is doing things the right way? And it could be
Yeah.
an old boss, it could be a client of yours, someone that you're a customer of, absolutely anyone that you think deserves a shout out.
So this is his name is Garvin J. Bush. He runs Green Alpha Investments. They're based just outside of Boulder. And Garvin, so he's in many ways he is a clone of me, because we have a very similar investment philosophy. But Garvin runs a fund called the Green Alpha Fund, and um, we have just these amazing discussions about how this industry really needs to shift to have the kind of impact that we really believe it can. How we need to shift from this idea of investing less bad versus investing in solutions. And every time I try to visit him once a year, and I've actually been lucky enough to do that the last probably 3, 4 years. In fact, if you want to catch him, there is a two-part interview with him on my podcast, the Dollars and Change podcast. Dollars, and it's dollars ampersand change. It's not dollars and change. Um, but we have a really, really good two-part discussion in there that I recorded last year with him, amongst other things. So I will pitch my podcast as well. Um, if anybody who recognizes the actor Ed Begley Jr., who has been in all kinds of stuff over the years, he was my premier guest, and he has been an environmental advocate. He's got a great book that came out last year. Obviously I read a lot. I read probably 50 to 60 books a year, so that's one of my big avocations, if you will. Um, Ed is another person I would call out as just being he's Hollywood, but he is the kind of person I hadn't seen him probably in 12, 14 years when I showed up at his house to record the podcast, but he's warm and he's inviting and he's genuine and he cares about the environment just deeply. And so he's the first episode. He's somebody else to check out the premiere episode. I think is so much fun because I'm still getting my legs under me as a podcast host. And we just talked about so many cool things. He's got a home in Studio City that is, um, super sustainable, and he gives me a tour of it. And anyway, those are you asked for one, I gave you two.
I love it so much. I keep going back to how much you've emphasized solutions-based intentionality in your choices, and it's something that I personally have been thinking a lot about, especially as I'm going through this project, that being able to focus on solutions and focus on being feeling productive, it gives such a purpose and such a sense of fulfillment and meaning into life that
Hmm.
I think has the capacity to like, reduce some of our stress and like allow us to enjoy our lives a lot more. And it, at least for me personally, is really heartwarming to hear you talk so much about that. And it's a good reminder, even for me as a person, to be able to like kind of focus and tunnel vision into those kinds of things, however we can. And I just can't thank you enough for that. I think that that's so insightful.
Yeah, I think there's something special about living life intentionally. Again, it's not the easiest thing to do because we get caught in, the ruts of habit. But another book is Atomic Habits. I think has been just such a vital piece to read in helping to form better habits because I mean, ultimately we are our habits. We are what we do every day, how we, what we eat, how we sleep, all of these things. And if you want to change, the only way you can change is by changing your habits. The brute force method that that was preached for so long just doesn't work. You have to just very incrementally change your habits, and there's an intentionality to that. And that intentionality, again, is very much linked to, we're talking about solutions. Well, solutions are come out of intentionality.
You're speaking right to my book lover's heart here. I loved Atomic Habits so much. I talk often about the compound interest of habits often, like as much as I can fix that into. But I just think it's profound, and it is something that personally helped me, and I can see kind of the changes after the years of kind of living like that. So, and I again, Peter, I feel like I say this at the end of every interview, every time that I talk to someone, but I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I
Yeah.
have a gajillion more questions and things, little rabbit holes that I want to jump down with you. I can't thank you enough for this. Thank you so much for answering all my questions, letting me derail us with a generational philosophical discussion, and thanks so much for being here.
I think any good discussion is nonlinear. We're talking about nonlinear life. I think a good discussion is nonlinear, and so it would be boring if we just stayed right straight on the track. I want to share our website. It's just earthequity.com. Really simple to go to. If anybody has any questions, you can contact me through the website. I'm grateful for the time to be able to chat with you. Let's do it again. If you want to talk some more, we can do part two.
Thank you so much to every single person that's listened, every single person that has told someone else about it, that has shared an episode, that has sent a blog post to someone else to read, that shares on social media, that responds back to me, that engages and lets me know what they think and what they're hearing. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed through the Patreon. These subscriptions are what fund the project and keep it going. There's so many different tiers available, starting at $1 and $2 a month, and each tier gets you access to different kinds of things. So, for example, the $2 a month listener tier gets you access to interviews on Thursdays, so early access to the audio and video versions of interviews that are out every Thursday, typically in the evening time. Your $3 a month member tier adds on these weekly between the interview series on Mondays. That's what I gave a little sneak peek. There are some early examples of those between the interviews that were posted on the main feed, so that folks could kind of get a lay of the land and what's behind the motivation for this project. Those reflection episodes are still going every Monday, and the folks in that member tier are still have access to those things. The VIP tier has access to merch. I really do my best to give back to those that are joining. So check the show notes for the link to the Patreon. There's a lot there. If you're interested in any of the behind the scenes of like how this project gets made from the back end, like if you are someone who is interested in starting anything that looks similar to this, whatever your topic is, like I am really open, just like I'm asking these folks that I'm interviewing about like the mistakes that they made. I do my best to be very open about the mistakes and the lessons learned that I made, plus the resources that really helped me, the people that I'm looking up to. Like I yeah, why not share my experience there? So that's all available there. And just in general, I truly want to hear from you. So please, please message me on Instagram, message me on the Patreon, leave me a review that tells me what you think of it. Email me your thoughts and your suggestions, including the things that you don't like. I got tough skin, people. You can tell me the things that I need to improve upon. I am very open about early days, early stage, that I this entire project and almost everything that goes into it is brand spanking new to me. And I am learning, not just from these leaders that I'm interviewing, but I'm learning about the technical side of things. I'm learning about social media. I'm learning about advertising. Like, I'm learning about all of these types of things, and I am happy to share what I have learned as well. And so I want your feedback. I want the things that I'm not talking about that you want to hear about that is within this Capitalism for Good space. So reach out to me. I want to hear from you. I truly do. Send me your thoughts and I'll do your research. Like I said, I really am listening and kind of creeping to see where people are coming from, where you're located, what your interests are. And so if there's an industry or an interest of yours that I haven't hit on that you are really interested, like, send me your thoughts. If you have a question that is related to this Capitalism for Good project, I'll do the research here. So send them on over. I'm already doing it. I might as well do something that fits what you're asking for and what you're looking for. Finally, my last little plug and shout out here is, if you are interested in working together to build better community, check out the business website for CFG. It's at capitalism-for-good.com. There's also a link down in the show notes. And whether you are interested in starting or expanding a community give back initiative with your company, if you want to plan a volunteer day and you don't want someone that's already your full-time employee taking away from their normal job to do it, if you're looking for a charity partner within a specific space or that aligns cleanly with your company values and your philosophy, or if you want to perhaps talk about some education around the value of community partnerships and what that can add to your business if done well and done efficiently and effectively, I would love to help. So I'd be happy to get on a phone call, see how CFG can help you with your community goals. Once again, would love to hear from you if you've got thoughts, needs, questions, interest anywhere within that space. I I truly believe that we are stronger when we work together, and that we can truly make a really impactful, positive future if we just put all our brains and our skills together and leverage those things to build better community. So, all right, that's enough. Let's go leave this place better than we found it.